My name is Maya Rivers, I'm 30. And I didn't realize how quickly family could turn into a business arrangement until the night I learned my place in theirs. It didn't happen with screaming. No dramatic confession, no slammed doors. Just one casual sentence at my parents' dinner table, delivered the way someone might mention the weather. Oh, we're giving Aunt Linda the gift on the cruise. I remember the exact sound my fork made when it hit the plate. A small, sharp clink, like punctuation in a conversation I didn't know I was losing. Cruise. The word sat there, heavy, bright, unreal. I blinked at my sister, Brianna, waiting for the punchline. Brianna was curled into the corner of the couch with her phone glowing against her face, scrolling like she wasn't about to casually detonate my reality. She didn't even look up when she said it, which should have been my first clue. What cruise? I asked, forcing a laugh that came out thin. Brianna finally lifted her eyes, eyebrows knitting like I'd just spoken a foreign language. The cruise we've been planning for months, she said slowly. Don't tell me you forgot. I turned to my mom for clarification, because surely, if there was a whole family cruise happening, I would have known. A text, a call, a mention, anything. My mom's smile looked taped on, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. It's to celebrate your Aunt Linda's retirement, she said. A few days on the ship, and then Hawaii after. Hawaii. My mouth opened and nothing came out. Across the room, my dad sat half watching the TV, remote in hand, but I noticed how he didn't look surprised. Not confused, not even guilty. Just resigned. Like this was already decided, like the meeting had happened without me, and they were only looping me in because I accidentally wandered into the room. I tried to keep my voice steady. Why didn't anyone tell me? Another pause. A silence that felt coordinated. Then my mom gave a small nervous chuckle. Well, we thought you'd be more help staying back. Staying back. The phrase didn't even register at first because my brain kept snagging on the larger problem. I wasn't invited. I wasn't included in the celebration of the woman who had been the glue of our entire family for decades. Aunt Linda, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, who sent college care packages, who showed up to every graduation and every hospital waiting room. She was the reason our family still pretended to be a unit instead of a scattered set of grudges. I'd been genuinely excited to celebrate her, and now I was being told I'd be more help, not going. Help with what? I asked, though something cold was already forming in my stomach. Brianna shrugged like it was obvious. The kids. I stared at her. The kids. Yeah, she said, and went back to scrolling. You're good with them. It just makes sense for you to stay and babysit while we're gone. Babysit. Let me paint the picture they were so comfortable assigning me without permission. Between Brianna, our cousin Kelsey, and another cousin, there were 4 kids under the age of 4. A 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and twins who'd just turned 1. 4 tiny tornadoes, 4 schedules, 4 sets of diapers, nap times, tantrums, night wakings, meals, and constant vigilance. And my family, my own blood, had sat together for months planning a once-in-a-lifetime vacation, and the role they carved out for me was free childcare. I felt my face go hot. So you planned this trip. You didn't invite me, and you just assumed I'd be okay staying behind to watch 4 kids. Brianna didn't even look up this time. Well, yeah, you're always reliable, and you don't have kids or anything tying you down. Reliable. There it was. The word my family used like a compliment, like a crown. But in that moment, it felt like a collar. I looked at my mom, desperate for her to say something that sounded like love. Something like, we're sorry, we messed up. Of course you're coming. Instead, she reached for my hand with soft fingers and soft guilt. We didn't mean to leave you out, honey, she said. We just figured you'd understand. You've always been the responsible one. Responsible. Reliable. 2 pretty words they used to dress up the same ugly truth. Maya will sacrifice. Maya won't say no. Maya will swallow it. I thought about all the times I'd stepped in. The emergency pickups. The last minute, can you watch her just for an hour? That turned into 6. The weekends I'd rearranged, the plans I'd canceled, the way my life always seemed to bend around theirs because it was easier for everyone if I did. And the part that made my stomach twist wasn't even the babysitting. It was the months of silence. The private Facebook group Brianna later mentioned, like it was nothing. The group chat I apparently wasn't in. The family gatherings where nobody remembered to mention they were planning a cruise to honor Aunt Linda. They all knew I don't even use Facebook. They could have texted me, called me, said it at any dinner. They didn't, which meant the exclusion wasn't an accident. It was a plan. My mom tried to brighten her voice, like a magician trying to distract from the trick. We'll bring you back a souvenir. A souvenir. I almost laughed. It came out as something sharper, something between a scoff and a gasp. Brianna finally looked up, irritation flickering. "It's not like you'd enjoy the cruise anyway," she said. "You're not a big fan of crowds." And suddenly it wasn't enough that they'd decided my role for me. They were also deciding what I liked, what I wanted, what I deserved. Like I was a background character in their story. My phone buzzed in my pocket. An incoming message from Caleb, my boyfriend. The one person who didn't treat my time like it belonged to them. "How's dinner? You okay?" I stared at the screen and something in me pinched, because even without being here, Caleb could sense the shift. I typed back with stiff fingers. "Not okay. We'll explain soon." Then I looked up at my family again. My dad's quiet indifference, my mom's practiced guilt, my sister's casual entitlement, and I felt a strange clarity settle over me, like ice. This wasn't about one trip. This was about what the trip revealed. They didn't see me as someone who should be celebrated alongside them. They saw me as a tool, a safety net, a solution. And the worst part? They had been so confident I'd accept it that they hadn't even bothered to ask. I pushed back from the table slowly, chair scraping the floor. "I'm going home," I said, voice low. My mom's face tightened. "Maya, don't be dramatic." Dramatic. Another label to keep me in line. I grabbed my coat, hands trembling, not from fear, but from the effort of holding myself together. As I stepped outside, the night air hit my face like a slap. Cold, sharp, honest. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the responsible one. I felt like the fool who'd been trained to smile while being used. On the drive home, the word reliable kept echoing in my head, over and over, until it stopped sounding like a compliment at all. It started sounding like a warning. And somewhere deep in my chest, something finally whispered back. Not this time. For 2 days after that dinner, I moved through my life like my skin didn't fit right. I went to work. I answered emails. I smiled at coworkers in the hallway. I even laughed once. This automatic little sound that came out before my brain could stop it. But underneath everything, there was this hum, a pressure behind my ribs. Because no matter how many times I replayed it, the moment kept landing the same way. They didn't forget me. They assigned me. And the part that made my stomach twist wasn't even the babysitting. It was the ease with which they did it. Like my life was a blank space on their calendar they were entitled to fill. That second night, Caleb came over with takeout and a look on his face that said he'd been thinking about my text for hours. He didn't bombard me with questions. He didn't talk over me. He just set the food down, sat beside me on the couch, and waited. So I told him everything. I told him about the cruise, Hawaii, the private Facebook group, Brianna's shrug. My mom's, "You've always been the responsible one." When I finished, the apartment was too quiet. Caleb stared at the wall for a long moment, jaw working like he was holding something back. "Do you want to go?" he asked finally. The question hit me like a real hand on my shoulder. Grounding, simple, respectful. Not "will you babysit?" Not "it makes sense." Not "we're counting on you." Just "do you want to go?" My throat tightened. "Yes," I admitted. I do. It's Aunt Linda. She matters to me." "Then go," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I let out a hollow laugh. They already planned on me staying. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Planned, without asking. His tone made the word ugly, like it deserved. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while my brain ran through options like a panicked computer. Part of me wanted to swallow it, do what I always did, keep the peace, be the helper, be the one who understands. But another part of me, the part that had scraped itself raw at that dinner table, kept whispering, "If you don't stop it now, you never will." So on the third day, I did something I'd never done before. I reached for the truth, not the role they'd written for me. I texted Brianna, me. "I want to go on the cruise too. I already have time off approved. I can book my own ticket if I need to." I watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, appear again. Then her answer came through so fast it felt like she'd been waiting. "Brianna, sorry, there's no space left." I blinked at the screen. No space left. Like I was trying to squeeze into a crowded elevator. Like I was a stranger who'd asked to join at the last second, not her sister. I typed back slower. Me. "What do you mean no space? I can book separately. I can fly to Hawaii and meet you after if I have to." This time she took longer. The typing bubble popped up and hovered, like she was choosing the exact words to keep me in my place. Then, "Brianna, it's sold out. And honestly, it was hard enough coordinating everyone. We can't change things now." I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, feeling my cheeks burn. Then I saw the second message come in right after, the one that made my blood go cold. "Brianna, also if you do decide to come, you'd need to figure out childcare first. We already planned on you staying with the kids. There it was. The truth without makeup. Not an invitation. Not a reconciliation. A condition. I stared at the words until they blurred. They had already planned my time, my labor, my week. Like I was a spare part they could bolt into place. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For a second, I felt that familiar urge to soften it, to explain nicely, to phrase it gently so she wouldn't get defensive. Then I remembered her shrug. I remembered my mom's taped-on smile. I remembered how none of them had asked, and something in me hardened into a clean edge. Me. Nobody asked me to babysit. I'm not doing it, and I'm not going to apologize for that. The typing bubble appeared instantly. Angry. Frantic. Brianna, are you serious? We all have kids. You're the only one who doesn't. You're free. Free. Like I was unclaimed property. I inhaled slowly, the way Caleb always told me to when I was about to let my emotions drag me into a spiral. Then I typed, me. Having no kids doesn't mean I have no life. You had months to arrange childcare. You chose not to. That's not my responsibility. She didn't respond. For half an hour, I sat there staring at my phone, waiting for her to come back with an apology. Instead, what I got was silence. And in that silence, I could almost hear her thinking, fine, if she won't obey, we'll send Mom. The next morning, my phone rang at 8:12 a.m. I saw Mom on the screen and felt my stomach drop, because my mother's calls didn't come with questions. They came with conclusions. I answered anyway. Hi, Mom. Her voice was soft, but not warm. Soft the way a blanket can smother you. Honey, I just don't want there to be bad blood in the family. There it was, the opening line, the classic guilt trap prelude. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. It's not about bad blood. It's about respect, I said, and my own voice surprised me, steady, clear. You all planned a trip for months and didn't tell me. Then you assumed I'd babysit without asking. She sighed like I was making things difficult on purpose. We didn't mean to exclude you, she said. We just thought you'd be more comfortable staying back. Comfortable? I repeated, disbelief sharpening the word. Mom, 4 kids under 4. That's comfortable? It's just, she started, then pivoted exactly the way I knew she would. Families help each other. That's what we do. I could feel my heart pounding, but I didn't let it steer me. Families also consider each other, I said. And nobody considered me. Not my feelings, not my plans, not what I wanted. You just decided. She was quiet for a beat, then her tone changed, slightly firmer, slightly colder. We're all counting on you, Maya. That line used to hook me every time. It used to make me feel important. Now it just sounded like a leash. No, I said. One syllable, simple, final. There was a pause on the other end, like she hadn't heard me correctly. What do you mean no? She asked. I mean, I'm not babysitting, I said. And if that ruins your plans, then you should have planned better. Her voice wavered into disappointment, the weapon she loved most. I raised you to be better than this. I laughed once, sharp and bitter. Better than what, Mom? Better than being treated like I matter? Maya. No, I repeated, firmer. I'm not doing this. She exhaled, long, heavy, like I'd just confessed to a crime. Then she said quietly, I hope you're happy with yourself, and hung up. I stared at my phone after the call ended, my hand trembling. Because here's the thing, no one tells you about setting boundaries. It doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels like stepping off a cliff. A few hours later, I got a text from Kelsey, the cousin with the twins. Kelsey, I understand why you're upset, but you should think about the bigger picture. It's hard for parents. We're overwhelmed. I read it twice, then once more. And instead of responding, I set my phone face down on the table like it was poison, because the bigger picture was exactly what I'd been staring at for years. The bigger picture was them always being overwhelmed, and me always being the solution. Caleb came over that evening. I didn't even have to explain. He could see it in my eyes, the way my shoulders held tension like armor. He sat beside me and took my hand. What do you want to do with your time off? He asked. I looked at him, this man who asked instead of assumed, and felt something in my chest loosen. I don't know, I admitted, but I know what I'm not doing. He waited. I'm not staying home, I said. I'm not watching kids while they're drinking umbrella cocktails on a ship. A slow smile tugged at his mouth. Not amused, not mocking, proud. Good, he said. Then let's make a plan. For you. For me. The words felt unfamiliar, like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. But that night, after Caleb left, I opened my laptop and started searching. Not cruises, not babysitting schedules, not ways to make myself smaller so my family could stay comfortable. I searched for somewhere quiet, somewhere that didn't have expectations attached to it. And as I scrolled through cabin listings, mountains, forests, hot tubs under open sky, an idea started forming. Not revenge, not a petty stunt, something cleaner, something that felt like reclaiming air after years underwater. If my family wanted to act like I didn't exist, then maybe it was time they felt what that actually meant. I didn't tell anyone I booked the cabin. Not my mom, not Brianna, not Kelsey, not even Caleb at first. That decision wasn't about secrecy, it was about ownership. For once, I wanted something that belonged to me alone, untouched by expectations or negotiations. The place was tucked deep into the mountains, 3 hours away, where cell service was described as spotty at best, and silence was listed as a feature. A small wooden cabin with a stone fireplace, a deck that overlooked a valley, and a hot tub perched like an afterthought beneath the trees. I booked it for a full week, the same week as the cruise. The day before my family was set to leave, I packed my car quietly. No dramatic announcements, no last texts, just clothes, groceries, my journal, and the kind of books I never let myself read because they didn't feel productive. Before I left, I stood in my apartment for a long moment, keys in hand, and felt something strange flutter in my chest. Guilt. Not because I was doing something wrong, but because I wasn't asking permission. I turned my phone on silent and walked out anyway. The drive felt like a slow exhale. The city gave way to winding roads, then hills, then stretches of forest so dense the world felt smaller in the best way. With every mile, the noise in my head softened. The constant calculating, who needs me? What am I forgetting? Who am I letting down? Faded into something manageable. When I finally pulled up to the cabin, I just sat there for a minute, hands resting on the steering wheel. It was perfect. Not luxury perfect, not Instagram perfect. Real perfect. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. The only sound was wind brushing through leaves. No crying, no phones buzzing, no one expecting anything from me. Inside, the cabin was warm and simple. Wooden floors, a couch that looked like it had held 1,000 quiet conversations, a fireplace waiting to be lit. I dropped my bags and did something radical. Nothing. I made coffee and drank it slowly on the deck. I watched light move across the trees. I didn't check my phone. For the first time in years, I felt my shoulders drop. That peace lasted until the next morning. I woke up to sunlight slanting through the windows and the faintest buzz from my phone. Even on silent, the screen lit up like it was trying to get my attention through sheer will. I didn't touch it at first. I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, fruit. Real food, eaten at a table without multitasking. Then curiosity crept in. I checked. The first message was from my mom. Mom, when can we drop the kids off? Everyone's getting ready to head out. My stomach twisted. The second was from Brianna, sent 2 minutes later. Brianna, we're on our way to your place with the car seats. Be home, okay? Then Kelsey. Kelsey, hey, are you ignoring us? We're kind of in a rush here. I stared at the screen, my pulse loud in my ears. They weren't asking. They were already en route. A familiar panic tried to surge. You need to respond. You need to fix this. You need to explain. Instead, I set the phone down. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. My phone buzzed again and again. When I picked it up, the tone had shifted. Brianna, this isn't funny, Maya. We're all waiting for you to step up. Step up? Like I was late to a shift. A voicemail came in from my mom. I didn't play it, but I could imagine it perfectly. Hurt layered over accusation. Love used like leverage. Then Kelsey sent a long message that made my hands shake as I read it. She accused me of being irresponsible, of abandoning the family, of ruining Aunt Linda's special day by making everything harder for everyone else. That one landed like a slap. Ruining Aunt Linda's day. The irony was so sharp it almost hurt to breathe. I wasn't there because they didn't invite me. I wasn't included because they decided I was more useful behind. But now, somehow, I was the villain. I turned my phone off completely. Not airplane mode, not silent. Off. The cabin felt impossibly quiet after that, like the world had paused. And in that quiet, something inside me finally snapped into place. I wasn't running away. I was opting out. The rest of the week unfolded like a life I'd forgotten I was allowed to have. I hiked trails that opened up into views so wide they made my problems feel small instead of suffocating. I soaked in the hot tub at night, steam rising into cold air, stars scattered overhead like punctuation marks, reminding me the world was bigger than my family's demands. I wrote in my journal until my hand cramped. I wrote about every time I'd been relied on, every time I'd been told I was so good with the kids, every time I'd rearranged my life so someone else's wouldn't fall apart. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I'd never dared to ask before. What do I get out of this? The answer was uncomfortable. Approval, temporary peace, a role that kept me included, just enough. Not love, not respect. On the fourth night, sitting by the fire, I realized something that made my chest ache. They didn't miss me. They missed my availability. They missed the version of me that absorbed inconvenience so they didn't have to. By the time the week ended, the anger had burned itself out. What replaced it was quieter, heavier, clarity. I drove home feeling steady, not triumphant, not smug. Just done. Done negotiating my worth. Done explaining my boundaries like they were optional. Done shrinking so other people could stretch. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone still powered down on the passenger seat, a strange calm settled over me. I knew what was waiting on the other side of that screen. Missed calls, voicemails, blame dressed up as disappointment. I wasn't afraid of it anymore, because for the first time, I understood something clearly. If standing up for myself made me the villain in their story, then maybe that story was never written with my humanity in mind. I turned my phone back on. It exploded. My phone didn't just light up. It panicked. The screen filled with missed calls, voicemails stacked like evidence, unread messages climbing into the double digits before my driveway dust had even settled. Mom, Brianna, Kelsey, an aunt I barely spoke to, a number I didn't recognize but somehow already resented. I didn't listen to the voicemails yet. I already knew what they'd sound like. Shock first, then anger, then disappointment, served cold, the way my family liked it best. I carried my bags inside, dropped them by the door, and took a long breath in my kitchen. The place smelled exactly the same as when I'd left. Quiet, neutral, mine. The phone rang again. Mom! I let it ring twice, 3 times. Then I answered. Where were you? She demanded, skipping hello entirely. Do you have any idea what you've done? Her voice was tight, furious and wounded in equal measure, a masterclass in emotional pressure. I was on a trip, I said calmly, the same way everyone else was. Silence, then an incredulous scoff. This is not the same, Maya. Your sister and your cousin were counting on you. When you didn't show up, everything fell apart. I leaned against the counter, staring at the faint crack in the tile near my feet. I'd noticed it years ago and never fixed it. Funny what sticks. What exactly fell apart? I asked. She inhaled sharply, like she'd been waiting for this opening. Brianna had to leave her 2-year-old with a friend she barely trusts. Kelsey had to cancel the cruise entirely to stay with the twins. People lost money, Maya. You caused a mess. There it was. The verdict. I was responsible for the consequences of plans I was never invited to. I closed my eyes. Why is that my fault? What do you mean, why? She snapped. You knew they were relying on you. No, I said, opening my eyes. They assumed. Those aren't the same thing. She tried to cut me off, but something in me, something steadier than anger, rose up. You didn't invite me on the trip, I continued. You didn't even tell me about it until I stumbled into the truth, and then instead of apologizing, you all decided my role was to stay behind and fix everything. We thought you'd understand, she said, softer now. You've always been reliable. There it was again. Reliable. Like a gavel striking wood. Being reliable doesn't mean I belong to you, I said. It doesn't mean I'm your backup plan. I'm part of this family, or I thought I was. She didn't answer that. Instead, she sighed and said, This isn't how families work. No, I said. This is exactly how ours works. And I'm done. She hung up on me. I stood there for a moment, phone still pressed to my ear, then lowered it slowly. My hands were steady. That surprised me. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Brianna. A wall of words. Accusations, betrayal, selfishness. She said I'd abandoned her, that I'd left the family in the lurch, that it was cruel to disappear when everyone needed me. Not once did she say I'm sorry. Not once did she say we should have asked. I didn't respond. Then Kelsey chimed in with her own rant. Longer, sharper, filled with phrases like family obligation and stepping up and ruining everything. I set the phone down and walked away. An hour later, after the shaking in my chest finally settled, I opened the family group chat. Yes, the same one I hadn't been included in when they were planning the trip. Somehow I'd been added now. Funny how inclusion works when someone needs a scapegoat. Messages were already flying. Side conversations layered over each other, a mess of blame and justification. I didn't read them all. I typed, slowly, carefully, once. Hey everyone, I've been hearing a lot of blame thrown my way, so I want to be very clear. First, I was not invited on the cruise. I wasn't told about it until I found out by accident. That alone was hurtful. Second, I never agreed to babysit. Nobody asked me. You assumed. I'm not responsible for fixing problems that came from your assumptions. Going forward, if you need my help, you need to ask me directly, and if I say no, that's the end of it. I love this family, but I deserve to be treated with respect. I am not free childcare. I sent it. Then I put my phone face down on the table and didn't touch it for the rest of the night. I thought that message would end it. I was wrong. By morning, my phone looked like a crime scene. Missed calls, voicemails, texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. People who'd suddenly formed very strong opinions about my character. The first call I answered was from Kelsey. She didn't bother with small talk. I don't understand how you could do this to us, she said, voice sharp and brittle. We thought you'd be home. When you weren't, we had no choice but to cancel. Do you realize how much money we lost? That's unfortunate, I said evenly, but it's not my responsibility. She gasped, like I'd slapped her. You're being completely unreasonable. This isn't how families treat each other. Helping requires someone asking for help, I replied. No one asked me. You didn't even tell me about the trip. It was an accident, she snapped. We thought you'd be fine watching the kids. You've done it before. I've done it before when I was asked, I said, and when I agreed. She went quiet for a beat. Then she said something that made my breath catch. You know we could have called the police for child abandonment. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. You can't report me for abandoning kids I never agreed to watch, I said. That's ridiculous. You left us in a bind, No, I interrupted. You put yourselves in a bind by assuming my life was available. My home isn't child-proofed. I don't even enjoy watching kids. I'm not equipped for that, and I never said I was. There it was. The truth I was never supposed to say out loud. She exploded. So you're admitting you don't care about your family? I'm admitting I care about myself too, I said, and that shouldn't be a crime. She hung up on me. I sank onto the couch, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the weight of finally saying things that had lived in my throat for years. Later that afternoon, my mom called again. This time she wasn't angry. She was disappointed. Honey, she began softly, we're all just so hurt. This isn't like you. I know, I said. That's the point. She sighed. Your sister is devastated. Your cousin is furious. They were counting on you. They should have asked me, I replied. They didn't. That's not my fault. This isn't how families are supposed to work. No, I said firmly. Families are supposed to respect each other. She paused. Then she switched tactics. Aunt Linda is very upset that all this drama has overshadowed her celebration. Something in me snapped. If you cared that much about Aunt Linda's celebration, I said, voice sharp now, you shouldn't have excluded someone who wanted to celebrate her too. There was silence. Then a quiet, clipped, I don't want to argue. And she hung up. That night, when my phone rang again, I almost didn't answer. But when I saw the name on the screen, my heart squeezed. Aunt Linda. Hi, sweetheart, she said gently. I just wanted to check on you. I swallowed. Hi, Aunt Linda. I heard there's been some drama, she continued carefully, and I wanted to say I'm so sorry. For what? I asked, confused. For how the family treated you, she said. I didn't know you weren't invited. If I had, I would have insisted you come. You should have been there. Her words landed like a hand on my back, steadying me. For the first time in days, I felt seen. I hate that this became such a mess, she said. You didn't deserve that. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, tears burning. Not from guilt, but from relief. Because the one person this trip was about, she understood, which meant the problem wasn't me. As for the rest of my family, I sat there wondering how much more energy I had left to spend explaining myself to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. Maybe the hardest lesson wasn't learning how to set boundaries. Maybe it was learning when to stop defending them. I thought I'd hit the worst of it. I really did. I thought once the yelling burned itself out, once everyone had said their piece, once the shock wore off, the noise would settle into something manageable. Cold distance, awkward silence. The kind of tension families pretend isn't there. Instead, it escalated, because when guilt stops working, entitlement gets louder. The morning after Aunt Linda called me, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in days. Not happy, but steadier. Like someone had finally placed a weight back in my hands instead of pressing it into my spine. That feeling lasted exactly 23 minutes. My phone buzzed. A text from Kelsey. It was long, paragraphs long, the kind of message someone writes when they're convinced they're in the right and just need to explain it one more time so you'll finally see the truth. I skimmed it first. Then I slowed down. Then my stomach dropped. She wrote about money lost, about stress, about embarrassment, about how everyone was talking, about how she'd had to explain to her kids why plans changed. Then, buried halfway through, like it was just another bullet point, she wrote, we could have called the police. You were supposed to be home with the kids. That's child abandonment. I stared at the screen. Read it again. And again. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief. A short, sharp laugh burst out of me before I could stop it. It echoed too loudly in my quiet kitchen, like the sound didn't belong there. I typed back, "Me, you can't be serious." 3 dots appeared instantly. "Kelsey, we were counting on you. You left us in a bind." That word again. Bind. Like I'd tied the knot myself. I took a breath, then another. Then I called her, because this wasn't something I was going to argue through text. She picked up on the first ring. "You actually think you could have called the police on me?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "You were supposed to—" "No," I interrupted. "I was never supposed to do anything. I never agreed. You don't get to report someone for not fulfilling a responsibility they never accepted." "You left when kids were involved," she shot back. "That's neglect." "My house isn't child-proofed," I said. "I don't have cribs, gates, supplies, and more importantly, I didn't consent. You don't get to assign me a role and then accuse me of a crime when I don't perform it." She inhaled sharply, offended. "You've watched them before." "When I was asked," I said, and when I said yes. "Well, maybe you should have said something sooner," she snapped. I felt heat bloom behind my eyes. "I did," I said. "You just didn't listen." Silence crackled between us. Then she went for the throat. "So what? You're just admitting you don't care about your family now?" There it was. The narrative they needed. "No," I said slowly. "I'm admitting that caring about my family doesn't mean erasing myself." She scoffed. "You think you're too good to help out now?" "I think I'm allowed to have my own life," I replied. "And just because I've helped in the past doesn't mean you're entitled to me forever." Her voice went cold. "You've changed." "Yes," I said, "I have." She hung up. My hands were shaking, not because I was unsure, but because I was finally understanding the depth of it. They didn't just expect my help. They felt owed it. The rest of the day was a blur of incoming messages. Brianna accused me of destroying the family dynamic, of making Aunt Linda's retirement about me, of abandoning her when she needed me most. My mom called again, not angry this time, but wounded, her favorite mask. "This just isn't like you," she said softly. "I raised you to put family first." "And I did," I replied, "for years." She sighed. "Families fight, Maya. That's normal." "Respect isn't optional," I said, "and neither are boundaries." She pivoted, just like before. "Aunt Linda is very hurt." That line didn't work anymore. "If you cared about Aunt Linda that much," I said, "you would have made sure everyone who loved her was included." She didn't respond. Later that evening, something unexpected happened. My phone rang, and for once it wasn't a demand. It was Aunt Linda again. "I wanted you to know," she said gently. "I told your mother I was disappointed in how this was handled." I swallowed hard. "She tried to say it was all a misunderstanding," Aunt Linda continued, "but it wasn't, and I told her that." I closed my eyes, emotions swelling in my chest. "I love this family," Aunt Linda said, "but love doesn't mean ignoring when someone is being treated unfairly." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, because that call did something dangerous. It removed my last excuse. For years, I'd told myself, it's not that bad, they don't mean it. This is just how families are. But now the one person I'd always respected, the one being honored, the one this whole mess was supposedly about, had seen it clearly, which meant I couldn't keep lying to myself. That night, I stared at my phone, watching messages come in that I didn't open. Accusations, guilt, moral lectures. And beneath all of it, one undeniable truth pressed itself forward. This wasn't a conflict that could be resolved with better communication. This was a system, one where my role was fixed, one where my value only existed as long as I was useful. And systems like that don't change just because you ask nicely. They change when you leave. By the time I reached the end of my patience, I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. The messages kept coming, less explosive now, but sharper in their own way. Brianna posted vague quotes on Facebook about toxic people who forget what loyalty means. Friends I didn't know commented with supportive emojis, validating a story where I was the villain and she was the exhausted mother doing her best. Kelsey sent passive-aggressive check-ins masked as concern. "Hope you're happy. Must be nice to just walk away." Even my mom, who had gone quiet after Aunt Linda spoke up, slowly crept back into familiar patterns, calling just to talk, slipping in comments about how heartbroken everyone was, how confused she felt, how none of this would have happened if I'd just stayed home. Every conversation circled the same drain. No one asked how I was. No one asked what I needed. They just wanted the old version of me back, the one who made everything easier. One night, lying awake in the dark, I replayed years of moments I'd brushed off as normal. The way my plans were always the most flexible. The way my time was treated as communal property. The way love in my family that always came with an invoice. And for the first time, I let myself answer a question I'd been avoiding. Is this worth it? The answer came quietly without drama. No. The next morning, I called my mom. She answered on the first ring, relief flooding her voice. Honey, I'm so glad you called. I hate this distance between us. Let's just put all this behind us, okay? There it was, the reset button, the unspoken agreement. We won't talk about what happened if you promise not to change. This isn't a fight, I said gently, and it's not something we can just put behind us. She hesitated. What do you mean? I need space, I said, real space. Her breath caught. Space from your own family? Yes. Silence stretched between us, thin and fragile. I love you, I continued, but I can't keep being part of a family that doesn't respect me. Every time I stand up for myself, I'm met with guilt and accusations. I deserve better than that. Her voice broke. So you're just walking away from me? From your sister? From everyone? If that's what it takes to protect my peace, I said, heart aching but steady, then yes. You can't mean that, she whispered. Families fight. That's normal. I've been fighting for years, I replied, and it's only ever hurt me. She cried, she begged, she promised things would be different. But I'd heard all of it before, every variation of stay that never came with change. Eventually, she realized I wasn't backing down. She hung up. I blocked Brianna and Kelsey that same day. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. The silence that followed was strange, unsettling, peaceful. I half expected another explosion. Angry messages from extended family, dramatic confrontations, threats of permanent estrangement. Instead, there was nothing. No demands. No emergencies. No one needing me to step in and save the day. And that absence told me more than any argument ever had. The world didn't fall apart without me. It just adjusted. Caleb held me through the aftermath, the grief that surprised me, the sadness that came not from losing them, but from accepting who they were. I wasn't mourning my family. I was mourning the version of them I'd hoped they could be. Weeks passed, then months. I started filling my time with things that felt like choices instead of obligations. Long walks, quiet mornings, plans that didn't come with backup responsibilities. Reliable became a compliment again, something I chose to be, not something I was punished for. One evening, sitting on my couch with the windows open, I realized something that made me smile softly. For the first time in my life, my peace wasn't borrowed. It wasn't conditional. It didn't depend on how useful I was to anyone else. It belonged to me, and that was the final update. Not revenge, not karma, just clarity. Sometimes the strongest boundary you can set is leaving the room entirely.